Sex is sacred because it is life. And that's the new story of desire that emerges from this integration of all the great truths in the world, and we call it in cosmoerotic humanism, sex erotic. Revolution, right? We're meeting each other in this moment of revolution. I want to welcome everyone, right, to this place. And we can just kind of find each other for a second, right, in the chat box and kind of feel each other. Who are we? Who are we? Who are we here, right? We are the revolution. That's who we are. We are the revolution itself. And what is the revolution, right? The revolution is, right, the experience, the knowing that we are at this moment of metacrisis. We are at this moment of metacrisis. And we have the capacity in this moment of metacrisis to be something more, to be something deeper, right? To realize the deeper dimensions of our joy and the deeper dimensions of our power, which are rooted in the deeper dimensions of our identity, of the answer to the question, who are you? And in this moment of metacrisis, we are quite literally poised between dystopia, dystopian possibility of extinction, the dystopian possibility of collapse of world systems in a kind of Mad Max way, if you remember that movie, a dystopian stagnation in which the world turns into a caste system, which makes India look like Athenian democracy at its best. Think Hunger Games, if we want to use a cinematic reference, in which a tiny elite rules the rest of society, and free will and human choice and human self-creation and our inward spaces of meaning are crushed by a totalitarian order which imposes its will through artificial intelligence and which dominates in the planetary stack every dimension of our being, because we actually have to be on the system with our identity number to survive. And the emotional sensors of affective computing, which is called emotional AI, literally read our every emotion. And if we don't align with a larger system, we're thrown off the system and we die. And within 2 generations, the very quality of our humanity has been killed. So we're in this moment where we're poised between dystopia and utopia. The same world systems that, without first values and first principles, lead us to dystopia, if we invest that same world infrastructure with a new superstructure, and by superstructure we mean, borrowing that term from Marvin Harris, the sociologist historian, by superstructure we mean a new story of value rooted in first principles and first values. We can, at this moment of metacrisis, when we're threatened by exponential technology, which animates a global civilization, at a time when every civilization has crashed and we haven't solved the self-terminating structures that have crashed those civilizations, and now the civilization is global and with exponential technology. So at this precise moment, just like dystopia hovers, so does utopia. There's actually a utopian possibility. And by utopian, I don't mean la-di-da. I don't mean fanciful. I don't mean fairy tale. I mean the beginning of a true utopia, of a utopia grounded in reality, which is the most beautiful world that we know deep inside of us is possible. We can imagine that world, and we know that world, and that utopia also beckons at the door. And for that utopia to happen, we need to actually change not just the infrastructure, we need to change the superstructure, meaning we need to be the storytellers of reality. and to realize that we are the new chapter in that story, and to know that that story is a story of value. So that's revolution. Revolution, R/evolution. Revolution. So revolution, friends. And today we're going to do something very special. I'm trembling a little bit because of the honor that we need to give to she, to Eros herself, to what the interior sciences called the goddess, what David Bohm, the physicist student of Einstein, called the implicate order, what others have simply called infinite reality. We need to honor reality today. And particularly, we need to turn to reality, to turn to a particular dimension of the meta-crisis, and we need to honor it and understand it in an entirely new way. To actually get beneath the headlines and to understand what are the failed superstructures, the failed stories of value that are actually generating the action. And everything we talk about today is really leading towards probably our last 10 minutes. And I want to just kind of, again, welcome everyone, like huge, wondrous, gorgeous welcome. And today we're going to be talking about Mahsa Amini. Mahsa Amini, who gave her life as she. We're going to be talking about what underlies the murder of Eros, which was the murder of Mahsa Amini in Iran. And we're going to be talking about how we actually honor Mahsa Amini as she and understand in a profound and radical way what's actually happening here. And we shine the light of first values and first principles of this new story of value, what we call cosmo-erotic humanism, on this moment to participate directly in the evolution of the source code, the evolution of consciousness and culture. Oh my God. So I'm trembling, madly joyous for the privilege of us being together today in this moment and in this place and in this time. So thank you everyone for being here. And let's see if we can just kind of drop in and find our way. And we're here not to be entertained. We're not going to do wisdotainment. We're here because we are the unique self symphony. We're the band of evolutionary lovers. We're Da Vinci, right? Imagine the Renaissance, which is this time between worlds and this time between stories. And we're in a similar moment. We're in a moment of what we called a few weeks ago neurocultural plasticity. We're in a moment in which it could all change. There's not yet a values lock-in. We actually have the capacity to create the future. And we need to create the future. We need to create the future as Homo Amor. And Homo Amor is the new human and the new humanity that emerges as the primary response to the meta-crisis. And one of the primary qualities of Homo Amor, the fulfillment of Homo sapien, is twofold. One, Homo Amor embodies in her very being a universal grammar of value as a context for our diversity. Homo Amor is value, right? Homo Amor is value incarnate. And Homo Amor speaks this new language, this new universal grammar of value, which is a context for our diversity, number one. And number two, Homo Amor is intimate. Homo Amor is intimate with the past. Homo Amor is intimate with the depth of the present. But Homo Amor is also intimate with the future. And we can feel the cry and the call of the unborn. Even as we feel the call of every human being on the face of the planet now, including the 2 billion who don't have access to clean water on a regular basis. And we feel the demand of the past that turns to us and passes us the baton and says, all of our unfinished business, it depends on you. And so we're trembling, but we're trembling with joy, with a kind of ecstatic urgency at the privilege of stepping in this moment in history So we're going to enter today as best as she allows us. And I'm sure we'll make mistakes, but we're going to make mistakes with her grace in the right direction. We're going to enter into the honor, the dignity of Mahsa Amini. And David's going to start by reading today's code, which is going to set our context. So, beloved David, take us inside to the code and maybe read it for us twice.
So here's today's code. Radical aliveness is life. We yearn for life. But when we are deadened, we move to kill life as a shortcut to genuine aliveness. The murder of Eros is sourced in the failure of Eros. We cannot become Homo Amor until we transcend the impulse to murder Eros. To transcend the impulse, we must first fearlessly recognize it. Reality is Eros. Reality is she. Reality is he and she in all gendered forms. Reality is she and he uniquely, Krishna and Radha, in all of her sacred, wild expressions. Radical aliveness is life. We yearn for life. But when we are deadened, we move to kill life as a shortcut to genuine aliveness. The murder of Eros is sourced in the failure of Eros. We cannot become Homo Amor until we transcend the impulse to murder Eros. We transcend the impulse. To transcend the impulse, we must fearlessly recognize it. Reality is Eros. Reality is she. Reality is he and she in all gendered forms. Reality is she and he uniquely, Krishna and Radha, in all of her sacred, wild expressions. So with that, it's my privilege to pass my word back to you, Dr. Marc.
Thank you, David. And we're here to evolve the source code. So here we go. And thank you, everyone, for the depth of your presence in this unique self-symphony. So here we go, friends. Oh my God, like total joy, total heartbreak, but total heart open, right? Total beauty. So I'm going to put on the screen, David's going to put on the screen, a text that we just wrote spontaneously yesterday morning. And I want to just slowly and gently read that text for you, right? And we're going to begin from there. Okay, so as soon as the text comes on the screen, I'm just going to gently read it. Did Mahsa Amini die in vain? Mahsa Amini was killed on September 17th. And Mahsa Amini was the goddess. Mahsa Amini was Eros. And her murder was the murder of the goddess. Her murder was the murder of Eros. She was arrested, my friends, for wearing her hijab, the Islamic head covering mandated by Ayatollah Khomeini when he took power in Iran, for wearing it improperly, and for her pants being slightly too tight. Mahsa Amini was not an activist. She was not involved, as her brother reports, in the political struggles of Iran. She lived in a small village. She was modest, shy, inordinately good. She had gone to Tehran to visit her brother and was arrested while with her family. When placed in a van, she was beaten by the police because she refused to accommodate, to bend, to be degraded by their insults, because somehow she knew in that moment that their offense to her offended she, offended reality, offended Eros itself. She understood that their insult insulted value itself, that it insulted the good, the true, and the beautiful. And in that moment, according to the eyewitnesses that were in the van with her, she could have submitted, she could have bowed, she could have allowed the degradation and lived, but she somehow intuitively, magically, mystically understood in a way that defies expression in words, that to allow the insult to her being in that moment was a violation of life itself. And so Mahsa Amini paid the ultimate price. She sacrificed her life for she as she. She sacrificed her life for Eros. She sacrificed her life. And we're going to unpack this today for us. Her death has rightly sparked explosions of sacred protest all through Iran and around the world, and explosions of value, explosions of Eros, explosions of human goodness, truth, and beauty. And the protesters are coming from all walks of Iranian society and all walks in every socioeconomic and cultural level from around the world. The protesters have been killed, beaten, and tortured. Hundreds, men and women, again and again and again. And at this moment, friends, we're gathering today. And we're gathering to honor the goddess and to answer one question. Did Mahsa Amini die in vain? And the answer, of course, is no. Of course not. But there's only one way to make that no true, to answer that question, and that is to together today enter into what the lineage calls umka de umka in Aramaic, the depth of the depth, lifnai v'lifnim, to the inside of the inside, to sanctum sanctorum, kodesh kodashim, in the language of the Aramaic lineage, to the Holy of Holies, to the sanctum sanctorum of human meaning, of human devotion, of human value, of human eros, and to understand what is actually at stake here. What do we mean by the goddess? And that's not a mainstream word that we hear often, but actually, without understanding that word, you actually can't understand physics or biochemistry or molecular biology. What do we mean when we say she? What is this eros we're talking about? And what does it mean to murder eros? But perhaps, friends, exponentially more importantly, right, to actually ensure that this murder of Eros wasn't in vain, that Mahsa Amini didn't die in vain, we have to answer the question, what does it mean to live in Eros and as Eros? What does it mean that all ethics are rooted in Eros? What does it mean that the clash between the erotic and the ethical that's assumed by all of society is a false clash? We assume that the erotic and the ethical oppose each other, that we need to curb Eros in order to be ethical, right? Mahsa Amini's hair, right? Her embodiment is understood to be a threat by the Ayatollahs. Somehow it will undermine ethos. But actually, we're going to go so deep into this today on so many levels, the erotic and the ethic don't oppose each other. I was privileged in 2003 to write an article on the cover of one of the leading intellectual magazines in the United States called On the Erotic and the Ethical. And there's a great cry attacking the cover, and the morality police in their American and Israeli form, came out, not to kill me physically, but to murder Eros nonetheless. But in truth, friends, and we're going to unpack this today. I know this is just words now. We're going to go so deep into what these words mean. But let's get the meta context together, okay? In truth, friends, there's not only no split between Eros and ethics, but actually every failure of ethics, every murder, every contraction, every pettiness, right, every deceit, all acting out, all violation, all of it is a direct result of the collapse of Eros. And this is one of the core principles of cosmo-erotic humanism. All ethical breakdown derives ultimately from the prior breakdown of Eros itself. And the only way, friends, to reclaim ethos, to reclaim goodness and kindness and sensitivity and radical empathy and open heart, and the sacredness of shared joy and tears and the delight and wild gratitude for each other, for our eyes, for our hearts, for our souls, for our embodiment, for the wonder of being, right? The only way to reclaim that is to reclaim and know the wonder of being an embodied, incarnate human, a unique incarnation of Eros, fully alive, fully awake, wildly good, and wildly free. And the only way to get home, and that's the only home we have, the only way to get home to that place is to reclaim Eros as the nature of reality in its deepest realization. To reclaim Eros in its deepest expression means to reclaim Eros in its most profound, urgent, ecstatic, its most profound, urgent, ecstatic meaning as the very source code of cosmos, of the entire physical universe, of all of the exterior sciences, and all of the interior sciences, to actually know that reality itself is Eros. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Eros. We're going to talk about fundamentalism. We're going to talk about pornography. We're going to talk about violations of Eros. We're going to talk about what it means to murder Eros and how we engage in the evolution of Eros. And we're coming together today, right now, right here, all of us from around the world, in a unique self-symphony of Eros. And so tenderly, friends, with so much respect and so much honor, I want to invite you, we want to invite each other, yes, you and me and we, right, to come today, to be here today, knowing that you're bringing yourself as a unique incarnation of Eros. That's actually who we are. As a unique, you are, I am, we are, you are a unique incarnation of divine aliveness. You're a unique configuration of intimacy, a unique pattern of desire that never was, is, or will be ever again. And we're going to spend today's One Mountain talking about these sentences. And to know that your Eros and your aliveness and your intimacy and your desire is precious before she, is precious before the divine. But it's not only, friends, that your Eros is precious before the divine. It's even deeper. It's that in your Eros, in your unique Eros, in your intimacy, in your unique intimacy, in your desire, in your unique configuration of desire, in your aliveness, in your irreducibly unique aliveness, in that she, reality, finds her own self-fulfillment, her own self-realization. Quite literally, based on the best integration of the interior and exterior sciences, we can say this careful sentence in the New Story of Value. She shudders in self-recognition as she feels the shudder moving through your body, crying out her name, oh God. So we come together, my friends, today, this Sunday, in this moment, to know, to cry out, and to scream in pain, and to cry out in great joy, in gratitude on our knees in devotion to she, to Mahsa Amini, and to each and every one of the other men and women who died for us, for we, for she, and to say to them, you did not die in vain. Your death sparked Eros herself. You aroused the goddess, and she is here, and she is awake, and she's alive. And finally, friends, one more word. To the police in the van who beat Mahsa Amini. But the police is also just a tagline. We can't see the faces of those boys. So to those young men raised on a deadening, degraded propaganda, which was anti-life, raised in a propaganda which didn't understand the Eros of goodness, which didn't understand the value of Eros and the Eros of value, which didn't understand the Eros of beauty and the Eros of truth. Men who felt alienated from themselves. Men who viewed their own sexing as a violation of she, because that's what was brainwashed. That's what contaminated their psyche from their earliest memory. Men brutalized by a teaching that was false and that took the name of goddess in vain. Men who were traumatized by their own experience of their own bodies. Men who were shamed at the very core of their being and were tormented by the system that created and controlled them. And so to those men, we say, brothers, there's always a path home, young men. There's always a path to liberation. We're not here to demonize you. We're here to demand your transformation. There's always a path home. Find, brothers, the goodness in your own hearts. Find the kindness in your own hearts. Find your way to understanding that your embodiment is good and that the feelings of Eros that pulse through you, if you trace them back to their roots, they're not in violation of the Prophet. They're not in violation of Islam. The deepest expression of Allah Akbar, of the great surrender to the goodness which is goddess, that's what they are. They are the deepest expression of she. We can't forgive you, young men. It's not ours to do, but you have to ask for forgiveness. and it will be granted. You have to find your way home, and you can, and you must, and you will. That would mean, in an unimaginable way, friends, that Mahsa Amini didn't die in vain. And to Mahsa Amini's brother and to her father and mother, whose hearts are ripped out, and to the father and mothers and brothers and sisters of every protester who's been killed in Iran in these weeks and in previous years, we're in devotion to you. You're our heroes. You're our teachers. Go in peace to the next stage of your journey, and be with us from the next world if you can right now, as we gather around the world, sparked by your spirit, which is the spirit of she, sparked by the flame of Eros and ethics that lit up your heart, and that now flames as unimaginable beauty enwrapping our world. For that, we come together right now. Okay. So let's come together. And we're going to go and we're going to play a song now. And the song is called Baraye, and was written by Shervin Hajipour. And it's become the anthem of this Mahsa Amini revolution. And there's 3 versions of the song, and we're going to come to each of them. But the word Baraye means for. I'm doing this for. And before we actually play the song, I just want to check with Krista, are the actual words on that song? So just check in with me for a second, Krista, if you can. Right, in that first recording, are the words actually there?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So take us inside, David. Baraye. Let's go all the way inside. Hold for 1 second. David, hold for 1 second. These, just so everyone understands, these tweets that you see, they're going to kind of show up on the text of the song. These are the tweets that Shervin, who's the songwriter, received, these tweets of protest and outrage, and he turned these tweets into the song. So the tweets will come up as he chants the song. Let's go inside, friends. Oh my God.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرص‌های اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
So what's Baraye? Baraye means for. It's to be intimate with reality, with her joy and her suffering, and to live for the great Eros of reality. Baraye in one lineage tradition in the Renaissance was expressed in the following way: l'shem yichud, for the sake of the union, of the coming together of he and she and all our gendered forms. L'shem yichud, that everything I do is for that great coming together. Because Baraye, because reality is Eros, moving towards its own evolution to ever deeper levels of the good, the true, and the beautiful. So let's go in deep for a second. We're going to do this in 3 stages, and this is for you, Mahsa Amini. This is for Mahsa Amini, and this is for everyone, and this is for she. And we're going to need each stage. So here's stage 1, and we're going to do a stage. We're going to do a little dharma, then we're going to chant again in a new way. Then we do another dharma, then we're going to chant again. Okay, so 3 rounds. Here we go. So 1, what is the story of value? The new story of value, which, the new story of value which integrates the deepest validated insights of all the interior sciences and all the exterior sciences, pre-modern, modern, and postmodern, into a new story of value. You could sum it up in 3 words. That's in today's code. Reality is Eros. That's what reality is. At its very core, the nature of reality is Eros. We live in what I want to call a cosmo-erotic universe. It's Eros all the way up and all the way down. And we wrote a sacred text, Return to Eros, which tells this story. A Return to Eros, which I wrote with Dr. Christina Kincaid, right, is about this realization that reality is Eros. And that Eros drives reality. It animates reality. And what's Eros? Eros is the core pulse of evolution itself that seeks, that desires, because reality desires, ever deeper contact and ever greater wholeness. And that Eros animates the 4 forces of reality: the strong and the weak nuclear, the electromagnetic, the gravitational, and drives reality towards ever deeper and newer expressions of value, of goodness, truth, and beauty. And that Eros is desire. That Eros is animated by desire itself. And it's why Alfred North Whitehead, who wrote Principia Mathematica with George Bertrand Russell, talks about the appetites of cosmos, because cosmos desires. And desire can't be split off. And cosmos moves us all the way through the world of matter and the world of life and the world of mind, the self-reflective human mind, through the impulse power of desire for more value, for more goodness, for more laughter, for more truth, for more beauty. And that desire awakens in us in an irreducibly unique way. And that's what we call unique self. That's why Claire Molinare founded, together with the think tank, right, a unique self institute, because it's the teaching that every human being is a unique incarnation of Eros. Every human being is an irreducibly unique incarnation of desire, an irreducibly unique incarnation of desire, which is value, because desire itself is value. That's actually the very nature of reality. Now let's go deeper, friends. Now it gets wild and beautiful and gorgeous and crazy and stunning. Okay, so we ready? We're ready, everyone ready? We're going to jump in now, okay? So what does that have to do with Mahsa Amini? What does that have to do with a hijab? What does that have to do with pants that are too tight? So we need, friends, a narrative of desire. We need a story of desire. We need a story of sexuality. We need a sexual narrative. And we have, in reality today, 4 sexual narratives. 1, held by the morality police in Tehran, sex negative. Sex violates the prophet. Sex violates ethos. Sex is somehow the great cosmic violation. We need to actually split off the sexual in order to get to the ethical. And is sex dangerous? Are they right that sex is dangerous? Of course they're right that sex is dangerous. But they go from dangerous to evil, where the physical incarnate embodiment of Eros that lives in we, in she, in thee, in me, is viewed as evil, and only the splitting off of that unique desire allows me to be purified. That's sex negative. But we haven't responded to that in the rest of the world with anything compelling. We reject sex negative, but what do we replace it with? We replace it with a second narrative of desire or of sex, which is sex neutral. Kinsey, the sex researcher, sex neutral. Sex is just like having lunch. But that's not true. Sex is not like having lunch. It's not mere biology. And we talk about this, friends. These are the 4 sexual narratives that we talk about in Return to Eros. And then we have a third sexual narrative or story of desire that goes through the world, which is sex positive, right? The sexual revolution, sex positive. Sex is a positive social force. It breeds satisfaction and cohesion and makes you feel better and more balanced in your life. Oh, that's just too bland. That's too weak. That's too insipid. Sex is more than merely positive. Well, then there's the 4th sexual narrative, which says, no, sex is sacred when you're having a baby. And there's some version of that narrative that actually appears sometimes in fundamentalism. It appears in many places around the world. But again, not quite right, because we live in a moment of population explosion. And 99% of sex that happens in the world is not to have a baby. Right? Last time anyone on this, right, on this broadcast, in this moment right now, of everyone in this broadcast, the last time, how many people here had sex the last time you actually engaged sexually in order to have a baby? I would wager almost no one. And babies are gorgeous, and babies are important, and babies are stunning. And I have 4 most beautiful kids in the world. And in the moment of their birth and the moment of their creation are wonder of wonders and miracles of miracles. But sex is not limited in its sacred, right, to procreation. Right? Sex is not sacred because it creates life. It's much deeper. Sex is sacred because it is life. And that's the new story of desire that emerges from this integration of all the great truths in the world. And we call it in cosmoerotic humanism, sex erotic. And sex erotic understands that the desire that rises in me uniquely is rooted in the field of desire. Sex erotic says that the eros that drives reality from the very inception, from the first Big Bang, from the very explosion of the original singularity, and drives all of the world of subatomic particles, and drives all of gravity and all of electromagnetism and all of the strong and weak nuclear, which moves through the entire biosphere, the entire world of biology, and which moves into and then emerges the depth of the self-reflective human, and then drives all the stages of human evolution and transformation, right? That eros that moves the sun and other stars, as Dante once wrote. That eros is not mere human sentiment. It's the heart of existence itself. And so when desire and sexual desire arises in me, yes, it needs the right context. Yes, it needs the right place and the right person, of course. But at the core, that actual experience of desire is the desire of reality arising in me uniquely. And until I know that, I'm shamed. Until I know that my experience is of radical shame, and shame means not that I made a mistake, not that I did something bad. The experience of shame is that I am bad, that I'm broken, that I can't be fixed. And that is the experience that arises in the entire leadership of fundamentalisms the world over, which is why fundamentalisms always become cruel in some way. They become cruel because the leaderships of fundamentalism are fundamentally shamed in their very experience of their own being, in their very experience of their own desire, because they don't have a story of desire equal to their experience. And so the first response, right? To promise Mahsa Amini that she, the goddess, didn't die in vain, that Eros is not murdered, that Eros is evolving and is resurrected, is to tell at the very center of the new story of value, a new story of desire, and the inherent and intrinsic and wild dignity and divinity of desire. So let's go back to our chant for today. Let's go back to Baraye for the sake of it all. And I want to ask you, we're now going to see another version of it. We're not going back to where we were, we're evolving together. We're participating now in the evolution of Eros. We're going to see another version of it. And I stayed up last night till maybe 2 a.m. searching the internet until this appeared to me. And I wanted to bring it to you today. And I want to ask you, if you can, look at the faces in this clip of the men and of the women. And they're singing Baraye. So take us inside, David. Full sound.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرام، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره‌ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای غوصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی.
Friends in the chat box, who could feel that? If you could feel it, just write Baraye, B-R-A, right? Just write Baraye. But however you write it, just if you can just write that, just like explode it, right? For the sake of it all, Baraye, for the sake of it all, we can feel, and the depth of this knowing of the interior and exterior sciences, you can express in one sentence. The universe feels, and the universe feels love. The universe feels, and the universe feels Eros, right? And the universe feels, right? And let's see if we can find this. The universe feels, and the universe feels uniquely through me in a way that it doesn't feel through anyone else that ever was, is, or will be. And we can feel each other. The way we feel each other is through our unique incarnation and shudder of desire. That's how we find each other. Uniqueness is not separation. Uniqueness is the currency of connection. It's what creates the unique self-symphony. And so, friends, if you're ready, let's go one step deeper. Are you ready? One step deeper, my friends? Who's ready? Who's ready? We got to go one hard, deep, huge, momentous, unimaginable step deeper. Because there's actually, in order to know that Mahsa Amini didn't die in vain, we have to go beyond the local experience of that particular tragic moment. And we need to place ourselves in the world context and to actually understand that there are two tragic responses. There are two ways to murder Eros. One way to murder Eros is through the morality police. And when you murder Eros through the morality police, then you have those same police who rape women who are in their imprisonment, who rape young girls because they're split off from their own Eros and they're shamed by their very existence. They're shamed by their very existence. They experience themselves as being fundamentally bad. And once you experience yourself as fundamentally bad, there's no constraint. You've lost hope. You've lost a memory of your own future. And so paradoxically, we've seen it in these protests, the morality police become the rapists. Wow. And so that's one tragic failure of Eros, and every breakdown of Eros brings a subsequent collapse of ethics. But that's not enough, friends. There's a second failure of Eros, which brings its own collapse of ethics, and we're not complete. And we haven't honored she unless we actually address that. And I want to say something here, and I want to go slow with me for a second, okay? And it's deep and it's hard to say, but it needs to be said. The secular liberal response, not the sex negative response of fundamentalism, but the kind of bland sex positive, or the sex neutral response that generates what I would call the pornographic universe, is equally, but in a completely different form, a murder of Eros. And I don't mean this is not a moralistic position. And I want to understand this really deeply. It's an understanding. It's not about nakedness. It's about something much deeper. So stay with us, friends. Let's go deep inside. Let's go really deep inside for a second. The tragedy of the secular liberal order. When I say liberal, I don't mean liberal as opposed to conservative, right? I mean the secular postmodern Western liberal order that includes, right, the preponderance of the mainstream, right, of the intellectual and media, right, and social and entertainment establishments, actually has deconstructed value. And when we deconstruct value, we fail to realize the central value of Eros. Eros is no longer a value because value doesn't exist. And desire is no longer a value because we can't locate desire as a value. Desire becomes a random accident engendered by random evolutionary survival, which is an embarrassment to our attempt to be a good citizen, which is why the liberal social order is producing a new puritanical culture that only understands violation of desire, that seeks to identify the great violators of desire, which in part is important, right? We should identify, for example, sexual harassment and have no tolerance for it, of course. We should identify the rape of men in prison and the rape of women all over the world and have no tolerance for it, of course. We should step up and stand against any violation of Eros. But actually, the liberal social order has just actually stopped there. We've identified the violators of Eros, but we don't have a story of desire. We don't understand sex erotic. So therefore, we don't know how to return to Eros because we don't actually understand that Eros is of value and that we live in a cosmo-erotic universe. And let me try and show 4 ways in a moment of just the way that happens. Now, stay close, friends. In other words, the sex neutral and the bland sex positive narrative, right? Or sex is only sacred when we're procreating. That becomes the narrative of the liberal social order. But actually, desire is the currency of life itself. Desire is value. So I want to try and understand it and go deep for a second, right? On 3 levels. So one, what is pornography? We generate a pornographic universe. And in this pornographic universe, and stay very close, friends, we decontextualize sex from story. That's at the very core of a piece of writing we're doing to honor all the Mahsa Aminis in the world, called the Phenomenology of Eros. And in this Phenomenology of Eros that KK and I are working on, this Phenomenology of Eros, we understand that pornography is not graphic sexual images. If you look up pornography in the dictionary, you'll say pornography is graphic sexual images. No. Pornography is graphic sexual images that are isolated from the deep and gorgeous textured story of human desire. And human desire means my whole life, my children, my values, my creativity, my ethos, my economics, my kindness, my goodness, my truth, my beauty. If you decontextualize sexual desire from the larger field of desire, if you take the graphic wonder of the sexual and you isolate it from the larger context of life, of a full life, aflame with desire in every dimension of reality, when you do that isolation, when you exile graphic sexuality from the larger story of a rich, textured, radically alive, dripping with desire, sacred autobiography in every dimension of life, that's pornography. Pornography is the decontextualization of radical sexing from radical living. Wow. Step one. And when we do that, we murder Eros. When we do that, we kill the goddess. When we generate a reality in which 10-year-olds are plugged in to high-speed internet pornography before they even can understand the softness, the gentleness, the quivering tenderness, the fierceness, the goodness of Eros as part of the larger lived life of full desire in every dimension of life, we violate the goddess, we murder the goddess, we murder Eros. But let's take it another step, and this other step is critical, right? And what is pornography in its next stage? Its next stage is, and again, pornography is not graphic sexuality. Pornography is addictive and destructive because it's isolated from the larger context of life. So imagine you have a 3-hour movie, a 3-hour beautiful movie about depth and life and kindness and goodness and sensitivity and complexity and the agony and the ecstasy of a human life. And in that 3-hour beautiful movie, you've got 4 minutes of radical sexing. Is that pornographic? No, of course it's not. And it's also not addictive because it's sexing in the context of a life lived, pulsing with a desire, which Eros and ethos are one. It's only the decontextualization of those 4 minutes, which exiles radical sexing from radical living. And that's the pornographic, and that's the murder of Eros. Now let's go 2 more steps. And these 2 steps are, I mean, they're so deep and they're so holy. So here's the second step. And this is really to understand that there's 2 forms of totalitarianism in the world. I want to make a big and a huge leap here. There's a fundamentalist totalitarianism that seeks to eradicate all scripts of desire. All scripts of desire are eradicated, and Mahsa Amini is murdered because her hijab is tilted, and because the young men who murder her are shamed in the very depth and core of their being. And that's one kind of totalitarianism. But stay close to me, friends, for a second. And this is so deep. There's a second kind of totalitarianism, which is a kind of pornographic totalitarianism. Now stay close. In pornography, you don't actually access the depth of your own desire. Your desire is actually determined by commercial commodified scripts of desire that have been written for you. These are not your stories. This is not your imagination. This is not the sacred imagination of she living as thee. This is not your unique depth of desire. This is not the unique texture of your configuration of intimacy and desire. None of this is you. All of this is a violation of your unique self. This is when the algorithmic structure of society sends you go to pornography, you watch one video. Then the algorithmic structure of machine intelligence identifies your first kink, and then it sends you to a second one that looks like that, and then to a third one, then to a fourth one, and then to a fifth one, and you get completely hijacked. You get completely drawn in out of yourself, out of your essential self, out of your inward space of desire, into scripts of desire that have been written for you. Now, once the script of your desire is written for you, we're at the door of totalitarianism. Freedom means you can trust yourself. Freedom means you can trust your body. Freedom means you can trust your desire. And the second that you can't trust your desire, and the second you can't trust your body, and the second you can't trust your eros, then you have to give over authority of that eros to someone else. That might be the morality police, or it might be a digital totalitarianism that actually imposes upon you, beyond the pale of awareness, the script of your desire that you naively claim as your own. But actually, you've been, through machine intelligence, defined by a set of statistical regularities of people watching the same kinds of porn, and we keep sending you invitations to something which will take you deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole and farther away from yourself. In other words, friends, both the morality police and the pornographic universe are rooted in the exile of desire, which is the exile of she, which is the exile of what the lineage calls the Shekhinah, the goddess, Eros. When you exile she, when you exile desire, when you don't have access to your own desire, which you can trust, to your own quality and configuration, to your own gorgeous queerness, to your own idiosyncratic story of desire, when you can't find that, but actually the script of your inner desire is written for you, we are already stepped into totalitarianism. Wow. And let's go to the last step, friends, and it's so deep. It's so deep, and let's be in this together. The only response to the pornographic, whether it's the pornography of the morality police, who are pornographic in their very being, or whether it's the pornography of a pornographic universe which is devoid of eros, the only response is your own unique desire. The only thing more powerful than the impersonal pull of depersonalized pornographic universes is the depth and intimacy of your own irreducibly unique story of desire. Your own story of desire. And imagine, if you can, for a second, if you want to get the depth of this reality construct, this new story of value, imagine an electrical cord. The end of the electrical cord, Unique Self Institute coming at you. The end of the electrical cord is a plug. That plug is your unique eros. That plug is your unique configuration of desire. So that plug plugs into the eros of cosmos, the cosmoerotic universe. That's the actual scientific structure of reality. Through your irreducible uniqueness, you actually plug into the socket, if you will, of reality's electricity, reality's electric eros. And that electric eros pours through your unique desire. But as long as you're imitating, as long as you're what the MIT Media Lab calls Homo imitans, you're imitating others. And for the MIT Media Lab, that's how you're supposed to be. And they're the people who are defining the internet today. But as long as you're imitating scripts of desire that have been provided for you that are in violation of your unique eros, which is your unique self, you have no energy. Your energy is hijacked. You feel pallid and insipid, right? And empty and devastated and depressed. The only antidote to morality police, to the pornography of morality police and their murder of Eros, and to the pornographic universe, which is split off from its own Eros, is the full power of your unique desire, which is your unique protest, which is your unique joy, which is your unique configuration of intimacy, which is your unique configuration of desire. That's the new story of value. That's the new story of Eros. That's the promise we make to Mahsa Amini, that you didn't die in vain. And so one more time, friends, we're going to go back in a third version to our chant, Baraye. We live for the sake of it all because we are omniconsiderate for the sake of the whole, because we are Homo Amor, because we're intimate with the whole, because we're intimate with all of the future. And we're intimate with all of the present. And Mahsa Amini died with us and for us. And in Iran, they're protesting, and we're intimate with everything happening in Iran every single day. And we're intimate with the tragedies of young men around the world who can't access their own powerful, erect expression of Eros, to women who can't access the dignity of their own desire because they were trained in the murder of Eros, which is high-speed internet porn from age 10, and can't access the very goodness and self-evident aliveness of being alive that the sexual actually gives us in her greatest and most wondrous expression. So we're going to now protest one last time for the sake of the all, Baraye. And I invite everyone, and as you listen, to pray. We're going to actually pray. And our prayer is Baraye. Here's our prayer this week. Baraye, right, the word, and then say, Baraye means for. So for what? For what are you praying? For the sake of all the broken women, for the sake of all the broken men, for the sake of my Uncle Henry who's having surgery, for the sake of health, for the sake of goodness, Baraye, right, for the sake of it all. So for the third time, the Holy Trinity, David, take us inside a new version, a new way, all the way home. Here we go. Let's pray together in the chat box.
For dancing in the alleys and the streets, for the thrill and the fear of getting caught kissing, for my sister, my brother, and unity, for all the times we tried to change their minds and stale beliefs, for the loss of pride, for poverty, for the dream of just a normal life for you and me, for all the children who are starving for a loaf of bread, for the greed of politics and all the lies they spread, for all the mass polluted air we breathe, for all the litter in the streets and all the dying trees, for all the animals who suffer from elimination, for all the cats and dogs who love us without no conditions, for all the tears that seem to never end, for all the images that keep on turning in our heads, for a simple smile to last a little while, for the future generations fighting for their time, for empty promises of heaven in the afterlife, for all the imprisonment of beautiful minds, for all the babies who were born and for the ones who died, for all the times you told the truth and all the times you lied, for all the speeches that we heard about 1,000,000 times, for all the shacks and shelters that were sold to make a dime, for just a glimpse of a peaceful life, for the rising of the sun after an endless night, for all the pills we pop just to get some sleep, for all mankind in our country, for all the boys and girls who never knew equality, for woman, for life, liberty.